In Paris in 1931, Papillon, a jewel thief, delivers some of the diamonds he has stolen to his contractor. However, instead of handing over all the stolen stones to Jean Castilli, the thief decides to keep some of them quietly and presents his girlfriend with a beautiful necklace that was also stolen from the jewelry store. At dawn, after a restless night, Nanette reveals her desire to live in a house in the countryside, away from all the violence of the big city. However, Papillon knows that there is nothing to steal in the countryside, so he asks for 6 months to accumulate all the wealth he needs, after which he promises to move to the countryside with his girlfriend. Suddenly, the man hears someone knocking on his door, and then the police burst into the apartment. The officers claim that Papillon is being arrested for eliminating Roland Legrand, a criminal who was attacked in a nightclub the night before after being caught trying to pull the wool over Jean's eyes. According to the officers, a witness has identified him as the perpetrator, but Papillon tries to defend himself by saying that he spent the whole night with his girlfriend. Frightened, Nanette tries to stop him being taken away, but the officers ignore what she has to say, and weeks later, the woman turns up at the prison to visit him. After being tried for a crime he didn't commit, Papillon is sentenced to life imprisonment and plans a way out of jail to eliminate all the people who set him up. As he doesn't know when he'll be able to get out of jail, he decides to end his relationship, but Nanette will never stop loving him. The next day, Papillon prepares to go to Devil's Island in French Guiana, along with dozens of other prisoners. While going through the evaluation process, he meets Julot and discovers that he will need a lot of money to get out of prison in a short time. So Papillon decides to try to make friends with Louis Degas, a millionaire who has been arrested for counterfeiting war bonds. In exchange for money, the thief claims that he will guarantee Louis's safety, as he knows that other prisoners will try to eliminate him in order to take his money. However, the millionaire refuses the help because he doesn't trust anyone, so he decides to take care of himself. That night, Louis is woken up by the screams of one of his colleagues, who is attacked in the middle of the night by one of the prisoners. Knowing that Gitu is hiding some precious stones inside his own body, the man uses a blade to cut open his stomach and eliminates the young man in the process. Seeing this frightening scene, Louis is amazed and is even more surprised to see how naturally the guards handle the situation. After removing Gitu's body from the cell, the officers lock the door again and act as if nothing had happened. So, the next day, Louis goes to talk to Papillon and reveals that he has reconsidered his proposal. So, if Papillon is able to keep him alive during the journey to the island, Louis promises to finance any escape he organizes. According to Louis, his wife has filed an appeal to have him released and he believes he will be home by Christmas, so he doesn't intend to run away with Papillon. In the early hours of the morning, Tribouillard, the man who attacked Gitu, approaches Louis with a knife, and seeing his partner in danger, Papillon immediately acts in his defense. After knocking down his enemy, he begins a sequence of punches and uses a piece of cloth to try to put him out while Louis picks up the knife. Hearing the prisoners' screams, the cops spring into action and use water vapor to injure the prisoners and break up the fight. After identifying those involved in the melee, the officers drag Papillon to the punishment room. For several hours, he is chained in an extremely uncomfortable position, but at the end of the day he meets up with the other prisoners and sees Tribouillard with his face all bandaged up. At this point, Julot advises him to eliminate his enemy before he tries to take revenge, but Papillon says he's not willing to take someone's life. While the prisoners are getting off the ship, Julot suffers a deliberate accident so that he can be sent to hospital. On arriving on dry land, Papillon and Louis walk around Devil's Island and see dozens of armed guards scattered everywhere. On arriving at the camp, the prisoners are greeted by Warden. Warden is standing next to a guillotine and says that the guards are allowed to shoot anyone who tries to escape from the prison. However, if they manage to get past the guards, the escapees will have to choose between hiding in the forest, where they will lose their lives to starvation, or fleeing by sea, at the risk of being devoured by sharks. If they survive the escape attempt, they will be imprisoned for 2 years in solitary confinement, and if they try to escape again, they will face a sentence of 5 years in solitary confinement followed by life imprisonment. If any prisoner takes the life of another man, they will be eliminated immediately, with no chance of redemption. After informing them of all the rules, Warden sends the new prisoners to their cells, and at dawn, they hear a shooting. According to the guards, an inmate has tried to escape from the hospital and Papillon soon comes to the conclusion that Julot is the fugitive in question. The very next day they arrive on the island. The prisoners are sent out to do manual labor and Louis does everything in his power not to be separated from Papillon. After carrying dozens of stones and pushing a trolley weighing several tons, the inmates stop to eat and Louis is startled to realize that one of his colleagues has collapsed from exhaustion. Concerned, he tries to alert the others to what has happened, but Cellier orders the man to remain silent and shares the perished man's food with Louis and Papillon. During the conversation, the thief discovers that Cellier also served in the Navy and strikes up a friendship with him. Together, they plan to get a boat to get off the island, and when they get the chance to talk to a merchant who has just arrived on the island, Papillon offers them $5,000 to take his boat. The man then reveals that his boat is on the other side of the river and will be there for 3 days. Papillon realizes that he will have to hurry if he doesn't want to miss this opportunity. At the end of a long day's work, while taking a shower, Papillon and Louis are surrounded by 2 other inmates, who attack them to steal their money. When he sees the danger approaching, the thief prepares for battle and throws a bucket of water to distract his enemies. Knowing that Louis is not a good fighter, Papillon has to go it alone with the 2 guys and manages to disarm them while his partner cowardly hides. After defeating them, Papillon hurries to finish his bath and remove all the blood stains from his body so that the guards don't punish him for making a mess. In the middle of the night, Louis begins to think about what his life will be like when Papillon leaves and comes to the conclusion that he won't be able to survive on his own until Christmas. So instead of waiting for his lawyer to release him, Louis asks his partner to take him along on their boat, but Papillon believes he won't survive long on the high seas. In the morning, all the inmates gather in the courtyard to watch an inmate being eliminated for having attacked 2 guards during the night with a blade. According to the warden, one of the guards didn't resist, leaving 2 children and his wife behind. Suddenly, Julot appears escorted by the guards and Papillon is surprised to see him, as he believed his friend had managed to escape. On seeing Julot's head removed, Papillon is visibly shocked, so warden orders him and Louis to carry the body and take it down to the pit to get rid of it. On the way, on seeing his uniform full of blood, Louis is paralyzed with fear, so he ends up being targeted by one of the guards, who starts to consider him a big wimp. While the millionaire is being whipped, Papillon thinks about how to help him and hits the guard over the head with a rock to protect his partner. When he realizes what he has done, the thief immediately decides to flee, as he knows he will be pursued by the other guards. While fleeing, Papillon hears the shots and jumps into the river, but the policemen continue shooting. Luckily, he isn't hit by any bullets and manages to swim to the other side of the river. Instead of going after him, the cops escort Louis back to the prison and ask for reinforcements to look for the fugitive. When he finally finds the marker of who bought the boat for $5,000, Papillon reveals that he doesn't have the money, but promises to reward Pascal as soon as they arrive in Paris. Just then, a group of armed policemen show up and Pascal says that even if Papillon had the money, he would hand it over to Warden, because Warden pays double to anyone who helps apprehend a fugitive. In the morning, Papillon is escorted back to prison and the warden tells him that he's lucky because the guard didn't lose his life when he was hit on the head. So instead of going to the guillotine, Papillon will be transferred to St. Joseph Island, where he will be confined in solitary confinement for 2 years. After spending several days in that dark, silent cell, eating only soup, Papillon receives a visit from Santini and is beaten up. After recovering from his attack, the soldier went to settle the score with the prisoner and got his long-awaited revenge. A few days passed and Papillon began to receive a piece of coconut with his soup. On reading the note left by the guard, he soon realizes that this is Louis's doing and feels grateful that his friend is trying to help him even from a distance. However, it isn't long before the kindness is discovered and the guard severely punishes the man who put the coconut in the bucket. That afternoon, the prison warden shows up to interrogate him and asks who paid to send those coconuts. However, Papillon refuses to hand over his friend, and because of this, Warden decides to have his food. From that day on, Papillon begins to waste away, as he hardly eats anything and loses all his energy. When the day comes for his haircut, he sticks his head out of the cell and sees one of the prisoners being dragged out, because he couldn't survive in that totally inhospitable environment. Realizing that Papillon won't be able to survive for long in those conditions, Warden decides to give him another chance, and says that if the man tells him the name of the person who tried to help him, he can eat every meal again. Once again, however, the thief remains silent, so the warden orders the guards to leave him in the dark until the end of his sentence. When 2 years have passed, Papillon is finally taken out of his cell and back to Devil's Island. When he arrives at the hospital to receive medical care, he receives a visit from Louis and the man takes the opportunity to apologize, as he considers himself guilty for what happened to his friend. According to Louis, his lawyer is facing some unexpected problems and hasn't managed to get him out yet. The latest news the prisoner has received is that his wife and his lawyer have got married, so apparently there is no one else fighting for his freedom. On hearing this, Papillon sympathizes with his friend's pain and mourns for him. At that moment, Louis feels relieved, because for a moment he thought his partner had gone mad. During the conversation, Louis thanks Papillon for not giving his name to the director and reveals that if he were going through the same circumstances as him, he wouldn't be able to do the same. By preferring to suffer all the punishments rather than hand over his friend, Papillon has strengthened his friendship with Louis even more, and now that they're back together, they're both starting to think about a new escape strategy. According to Louis, next Sunday the director will be showing a movie in the courtyard to entertain some local politicians, and the guards will be distracted by the event. At that moment, they will have the perfect opportunity to escape, but for this plan to work, Cellier and Louis will have to get a boat. After agreeing on the plan, the two men start to stage a fight and Papillon convinces the guards that he is crazy. At nightfall, the thief goes to talk to Michelet and invites him to join his team during the escape, but in exchange, the young man only has to distract the jailer. The next morning, when he meets Cellier, Papillon discovers that there is a boat hidden on the riverbank and they will have to row it to reach the ocean. When the movie starts, the group will pass the warden's building and Louis will have the key to open the door. Despite knowing that he needs Cellier to put his plan into practice, Louis feels that he can't trust him because he knows that the guy is totally unpredictable. However, Papillon says that no one on the island can be trusted, and as long as Louis keeps to the agreement, everything will go according to plan. After taking the money that will be used to pay the guards, Papillon hands his friend a box full of sleeping pills and asks him to put it in the guard's coffee. As he is about to leave the cell, one of the prisoners steals the box of sleeping pills and Louis attacks him to try and get it back. At that moment, he is hit and the fight is broken up by one of the guards. In the last 2 years, Louis has had to take on a position of trust in order to survive and has become the warden's accountant. Because of this, he is protected by the guards. At dusk, while Louis is putting the sleeping pill in the guards' drinks, his colleagues are getting ready to start their escape plan, and as agreed, Michelet lures the jailer away. At this point, Papillon and Cellier get up and grab the foot of the bed to defend themselves in case any guards find them on the way. After striking the jailer, the pair accompany Michelet to the exit, and then knock out the guards, who had almost fallen asleep because of the drugs they had ingested. Suddenly, during the movie, a storm breaks out and the warden orders everyone inside to hide from the rain. Frightened, Cellier tells them they have to leave, but Papillon refuses to leave without Louis and decides to stay and wait for his friend. Just then, Louis appears and says that he has managed to steal the keys so that they can get to the central walkway. The plan is to make their way to the watchtower while the lights are out, so that the guards can't see them. As soon as the prisoners jump from the tower, the lights come back on and Louis ends up twisting his foot. Once again, Cellier tries to convince Papillon to abandon his companion, but instead he asks for Michelet's help to carry him. Halfway there, the group comes across a group of armed men and Papillon prepares for battle. However, he soon discovers that the men are working for Gilly, the owner of the boat. When he receives the second half of the payment, the man takes the fugitives to the boat and helps them get to the river. In the morning, the group reaches the ocean and realizes that the boat has a hole in it, as it is gradually flooding. Seeing the water getting deeper and deeper, Cellier says that the boat won't hold all of them, so they'll have to reduce the weight if they want to reach dry land. Cellier's aim with this conversation is to convince Papillon to throw Louis into the sea, but the thief remains optimistic and says that no one there needs to be left behind. After a few hours of rowing, the prisoners take a break to rest, and while they are drifting in the middle of the ocean, Papillon spots a storm approaching. Terrified, he begins to prepare the boat to withstand the adversity to come, and Cellier takes a knife to eliminate Louis, as he is convinced that by reducing the weight of the boat, they will have a better chance of surviving. At that moment, Michelet gets up and tries to take the blade out of Cellier's hands, but ends up being knocked into the sea. Seeing the young man in danger, Papillon attacks his opponent and the knife falls into the water. As the two begin to struggle, Louis manages to retrieve the weapon and hits his enemy in the back. When he turns around to try to fight back, Cellier is hit in the neck and can't survive the loss of blood. After reassuring his friend, Papillon throws the knife into the ocean and helps Michelet back onto the boat. Together, they dispose of Cellier's body and work as a team to weather the storm. Days later, the thief wakes up in an Indian village and leaves the tent in search of his companions, who have also been rescued by the people. On arriving at the beach, Papillon meets a nun and discovers that he has ended up in Colombia. Even though she knows that these guys are fugitives from Devil's Island, Barbara tells them that all they need to do is repent so that their sins can be forgiven. For the first time in years, Papillon has the chance to enjoy his freedom and relaxes when he feels the seawater touching his skin. After washing up, he goes to meet Louis and tells him he's leaving. After everything he has done to keep his partner alive, Papillon says that their agreement is over and says goodbye to Michelet, who has decided to stay in the village. On the way, the man spots the guard's vehicle approaching and realizes that they are after the fugitives. He immediately runs back to the village to warn his companions, only to realize that it's too late, as the guards have just arrived at the tribe. As his foot is bandaged, Louis can't walk on his own, so Papillon helps him up and sees Matured being shot. The two surviving prisoners are then captured and discover that Barbara has given them up without mercy. 5 years later, on his second trip to solitary confinement, Papillon is sent back to Devil's Island, and even the prison warden is surprised to see him alive, as few people can survive so long in that place. By now, Papillon has lost all hope and lives in a totally apathetic way. When he meets his friend again, he realizes that Louis is on the verge of madness and regrets the end they both met. That afternoon, he asks his friend to help him get to the ocean and begins to think of a new escape strategy, as he refuses to settle there. However, Louis says that even if Papillon survived the fall, he would never be able to swim across the ocean. A few days later, in the middle of the night, the thief wakes up with a crazy new plan and asks Louis to help him build a raft. He believes that if they manage to reach the ocean, the tide will take them straight to the mainland. After watching a demonstration, Louis once again decides to buy into his friend's idea and helps him gather the materials needed for the escape. However, when they reach the top of the hill, Louis informs him of his decision to stay on the island, because after so long, he has come to feel that this is where he belongs. At that moment, the two friends embrace in an emotional farewell and Papillon throws his raft into the sea. Soon after, the prisoner jumps into the water to freedom and Louis celebrates when he realizes that he has survived the fall. For several days, Papillon sails aimlessly across the ocean. In 1969, almost 40 years later, he takes a plane from Venezuela to France. His goal is to publish a book that tells his autobiography and claims that it is not just the story of his life, but of the lives of many men. Since then, this book has sold more than 13 million copies in 30 languages, and thanks to this story, in 1970 the Minister of Justice signed a decree authorizing Papillon's return to France. For the rest of his life, he was a free man and the penal colony of French Guiana was closed forever. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.